This story begins with Charles Bronson, the main character, narrating his life as if he were performing in a vaudeville theater. The film switches between scenes from his childhood, teenage years, and adulthood, all told like he's on stage in front of a live audience. Sometimes, Bronson also speaks directly to the camera, showing strange mood swings. At other times, he just stares at the audience with a blank expression. He says he always wanted to be famous and believed he was meant for something bigger, but the audience doesn't react to his words. At the same time, there are scenes showing Bronson severely injured inside a cage, having violent fights with security guards. These moments show how aggressive he is. Even during these intense scenes, Bronson's stage version laughs loudly. He explains that when he was a baby and toddler, there was nothing wrong with his mind. But as a child, he started stealing, which made his classmates angry and led to many fights. Fights he always won. One time, he even threw a table at a teacher and knocked him to the ground. Bronson says his school days were filled with problems. The school would always call his mother, but she didn't really care about his behavior. Even though he was violent, Bronson says he wasn't bad. He still had his own rules and values. His first job was at a diner, where he worked but also stole when nobody was watching. Still, he shared the stolen money with a coworker he had feelings for. Bronson tells us that he was born with the name Michael Peterson, but later changed it to Charles Bronson, the name he became known for. During his younger years, the police tried to stop him many times, but he would always fight back. In one fight, he even bit off a police officer's ear. In 1974, in England, Bronson and his former coworker Irene moved into a cheap home after having a baby. It seems like Bronson didn't mind his new family life and may have even enjoyed it. However, after getting involved in more theft and violence, this time at post office, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His mother hoped he would only serve 4 years. When he hears this, Bronson becomes silent in front of his wife, who he never sees again. Even though people might think Bronson didn't care about going to jail, it actually affected him in the beginning. But soon, he mocks himself in the story, appearing dressed like a clown in a fancy suit, joking that he always thought he'd make a great comedian. To him, the prison cell felt like a hotel room. He would walk in circles all day, completely cut off from the outside world, all 365 days of the year. In one moment, he refuses to do a sewing job and gets so angry that he starts yelling, which causes the guards to beat him up. His bold attitude made him well known among other inmates, but he still had more problems with the guards. They gave him other jobs like serving tea, and he actually did well with it. One day, another prisoner complimented his fists. It was the first time anyone had said something nice about his hands, and it left Bronson in shock. He calls himself Britain's most violent prisoner and says prison is the perfect place for him. The film shows newspaper headlines describing Bronson as out of control and someone who only wants fame. The only thing he didn't like was being moved from one prison to another all the time. He remembers his time at Parkhurst Prison, where he lived like a king, even though he kept getting into fights with guards. He enjoyed this lifestyle, but eventually he was sent to a mental hospital, which he calls the Funny Farm. He describes it as a place where people smear poop on their faces and where it takes 4 guards to hold him down. During his time in the mental hospital, Bronson pretends to be mentally ill very convincingly. He is forced to take medical treatments that keep him heavily sedated most of the time. During recreational time, one of the patients tries to talk to Bronson, who is barely conscious, about his pedophilic urges. Bronson can't say anything clearly and only mumbles nonsense in disgust and denial. He tries to escape a few times, but he's always so drugged that he can't even walk properly. One escape attempt happens during a night party. Bronson stumbles around slowly, and when a staff member gestures for him to return to the group, Bronson is too weak to resist. He just goes back. In the middle of his delusional thoughts about being important, Bronson comes up with an idea. He decides that the only way to get out of the hospital and back to prison is to kill one of the other patients. He thinks they're all crazy anyway, so he chooses the same pedophile who tried to talk to him earlier. The attempt fails, but it's enough to get him sent to 26 years of solitary confinement. Bronson thinks this is unfair, especially since he's never actually killed anyone. On stage, as part of his theatrical storytelling, he acts out this moment, explaining that he was never given a proper trial for the punishment. While performing, Bronson shows scenes from one of his rooftop protests where he caused chaos in the city. He proudly says that his actions have cost the prison system tens of millions of pounds in damages. He now calls himself Britain's most expensive prisoner. After the riots, Bronson is declared mentally sane and is released. He is excited to see what the world outside has to offer. Before leaving prison, he has a final meeting where he is handed his personal items: a wristwatch, a leather card holder, and a comb. Though the comb is clearly a joke because Bronson is bald. Bronson is reunited with his parents, who have moved to a new house. They show him where he will be sleeping. Bronson finds out that many of his childhood belongings are still at their old house in Luton. He remembers his Uncle Jack and says that since Jack knows everyone, he might be able to help him get his things back. Bronson travels to Luton and meets his flashy and confident Uncle Jack, who is now running a brothel. Jack welcomes Bronson like a special guest, calling him an exotic figure. The women at the brothel all come close to Bronson, serving him cocktails and giving him attention. Bronson also runs into a familiar face from his past, a former prison mate who once complimented his fists when Bronson was serving tea. This man suggests that Bronson get into the underground fighting business. But Bronson needs a new stage name. He first tries to go by the name Charlton Heston, but that name gets rejected. So his friend suggests Charles Bronson, after the American movie actor. Bronson agrees and keeps that name. Now calling himself Charles Bronson, he watches an exotic pole dancer perform and unexpectedly starts crying. It's the first time he has seen a naked woman in years. His new job is fighting in bare-knuckle matches, held on farms or in small rooms. Bronson wins easily, sometimes mocking his opponents, like urinating on them during the fight. Even though the pay isn't great at first, Bronson decides to keep going. He even fights several men at once and defeats them, purely for entertainment. Eventually, it reaches the point where Bronson even fights a dog with his bare hands and wins. One day, while Allison is reading, Bronson tells her that he loves her. But Allison tells him she's in love with Brian, her boyfriend who rides a motorcycle. At Christmas, Bronson violently robs a jewelry store, stealing a ring he wants to give to Allison. He knocks out the salesman and tells the frightened saleswoman not to call the police until 15 minutes have passed. Later, when he meets Allison, she tells Bronson that she doesn't love him because he has no ambition. That's when he offers her the ring. Unfortunately, Allison tells him she's going to marry Brian. Heartbroken, Bronson congratulates her. He later tells the audience that the saleswoman actually waited the full 15 minutes before calling the police, which led to Bronson being arrested again, after just 69 days of freedom. When the prison governor asks what he did during those 69 days, Bronson answers, "I was building an empire," which sounds like a silly joke to the governor. Back in his cell, a prison librarian named Andy Love tries to leave Bronson something to read. But Bronson suddenly locks the door, trapping Andy inside and taking him hostage. He starts yelling and cursing, demanding to speak to the other guards. Knowing the guards will come in to rescue Andy, Bronson yells at the librarian to help him cover his naked body with petroleum jelly so he can slip and fight more easily when they enter. But Bronson is no match for all of them. He is beaten badly, then transferred to another cell with a muzzle on his face. The prison governor warns him that if he keeps living like this, with no care for anything, he will die in prison. Later, in the prison art room, his Spanish learning art teacher, Mr. Daniels, says a few kind words and encourages Bronson to draw. Bronson discovers he enjoys making art, especially drawings of birds. Mr. Daniels tells him to focus on finding the missing piece that doesn't belong. An animated scene shows some of Bronson's strange thoughts. Then, he has a talk with the prison governor, who wishes him success with his art. But Bronson doesn't seem to take the words well. Because of Mr. Daniels' support, Bronson agrees to give one of his artworks to the governor. His teacher continues to encourage him, but due to a misunderstanding, Bronson thinks Mr. Daniels wants to use his talent for personal gain. Feeling betrayed, Bronson attacks him from behind. After this, we see the audience cheer for Bronson on stage, but he leaves after only a few seconds. Back in the art room, Bronson paints himself black. After attacking his teacher, he threatens the guards and says he's going to kill Mr. Daniels. The governor tries to talk to him from outside the room and asks what he wants. Bronson answers, "I want music." Bronson keeps Mr. Daniels tied up and hidden under a blanket while classical music plays. As the music fills the room, Bronson focuses on crafting and painting Mr. Daniels' face. After a while, Bronson decides his artwork is finished. He tells the guards they can come in to rescue the hostage. He prepares himself for the fight. When the guards rush in, Bronson fights back, but they eventually overpower him and pin him to the floor. The screen fades to black and text appears. The real Charles Bronson has spent 34 years in prison, 30 of them in solitary confinement, with no clear release date. In the final scene, Bronson is shown inside a small metal cage, so tiny he can't even sit upright. He groans in pain. Two guards close the doors, cutting off his last bit of fresh air, leaving him completely alone.